Good afternoon, everyone. So we're coming to you from Amritkaal Ki Anganwadi. Now, this is a remarkable initiative by the WCD Ministry in association with NDTV. Of course, 1/3 of disabilities in India are preventable. For that, children need to get early intervention and also the kind of adequate care that they need and they deserve. As a mother of a child on the spectrum, I understand that early intervention is the only way possible to understand a child better and to give him or her the support that he deserves. We have a wonderful panel of guests with us to understand why is early intervention important, what can we do to give a supportive environment to the child who often is surrounded by self-doubt, what are neurological challenges that children face, how do you deal with invisible disabilities such as ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. So these are certain things that we're going to explore. I have with me the guest that I have with me, Ms. Pallavi Agarwal, who is a Joint Secretary with the WCD. She's been working on early intervention programs. We have Dr. Geeta Chopra. We all know her. She's been working with physical disabilities for many, many years. She's a professor in the Institute of Economics, Home Economics in the University of Delhi. We have Dr. Shekhar Sheshadri, who has often set the context for a lot of people like us, a psychiatrist and the professor of Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in NIMHANS, Bangalore. We have Nipun Malhotra, who is a symbol of resistance. His story is something that I can't tire of hearing again and again. And he is also the founder of NIPMAN Foundation, Wheels for Life, a crowdsourcing platform connecting those who need wheelchairs to donors who can financially contribute for them. We also have Ramita Kumari. She's an inspiration because she's an Anganwadi worker who works with children till the age of 5, and of course also deals with early detection and diagnosis of disabilities. I start with Ms. Agarwal. This new program, which is basically this protocol for Anganwadi workers, also looks at institutionalizing, normalizing conversations about disability, at the same time removing stigma, but also looks at early detection. What is the specialty of this program? Anganwadis have existed forever in this country. What is it special that you're doing?
First of all, thank you for inviting me on this panel discussion. What I would say, how Anganwadi has changed and how over the time you have heard the minister, you have heard the secretary speaking, and the earlier panelist also. But I feel there was a gap as we were talking of SAM, MAM, and undernourished children and anemic children. This was a gap regarding Divyang children. So now the conversation of the Divyang children, or I'll call them differently able children, has come to the center stage. And as we are reaching out to really nearly 8 crore children, or 80 million children, we are talking about them. And so early intervention and early detection of through this protocol will be a game changer. Because we all appreciate that when a child, a baby, is recognized for any, even for SAM, MAM, or malnutrition, and if the child gets recognized for the kind of different ability he has, so that child can be assimilated easily in the society. And so this protocol, as we're talking about, has 3 aspects to it. One is, the screening, and then is the referral and inclusion. So screening, as we all know, is like recognizing the child on the development milestones, like what are his physical abilities, his mental abilities, right. Are they progressing accordingly? And then we have the inclusive part, where there's community ownership. Right. The Anganwadi being the center stage, I would say the hub of the communities, when in those centers a child is given a dignified existence, and the ability is recognized and it is appreciated, then the families and the community themselves will also recognize that child. Right. And then is referral, where the Anganwadi worker or the ASHA worker or the CDPO supervisor, they cannot take care themselves. Through the tools provided to them, then the child and the baby can be referred to the professionals, and he can get an identity card, and he can give in a professional help. Right. So these are the 3 aspects of the protocol. which we can tell about.
Ripun, you were
Thank
part of the inauguration of the protocol. Help us understand how important this is when you're empowering and training the frontline workers to help detect any challenges or developmental delays in a child. How empowering is that for the frontline workers? At the same time, how useful is it for families that have to deal with it?
No, I think it's an extremely important initiative, and I think it's one of the biggest initiatives that happened in India for disability probably after the RPW Act that was passed in 2016. So I must congratulate the Ministry of Women and Child Development and the Minister for this particular initiative. As a lot of people in the audience and who are listening might also know, the census says that 2.21% of India's population has persons with disabilities, whereas the World Health Organization says that 16% of the world's population is disabled. It's obvious that Indians are not born with super genes that we are less disabled. The biggest problem in India is lack of early detection of disabilities. And that happens because of two reasons. One, of course, people do not get access to medical care. And second, there are also societal stigmas because of which parents at times hide away children and don't really take them out in the open to medical facilities or outside to find out what is really wrong with their own child in that sense. Since Anganwadi workers are frontline workers and are interacting with society on a day-to-day basis, I don't think any family can hide their child with a disability away from them in that sense. Secondly, Anganwadi workers can also be a great sounding board for parents on what to do, where to refer to the children once they're diagnosed, etc. So I think this is going to be a game changer in that sense.
Right.
And it's going to be extremely important.
Dr. Sheshadri, there's something important and very interesting that you said in the morning today. You said when we talk about disability, we often forget the human aspect of it. There is a human at the end of disability. And when I was going through therapies with my son, I used to take him from one class to the other, and I forgot the rigor of it. So help us understand what is a holistic and a humane approach to approaching a problem like this or a challenge like this.
I'd like to predicate my response based on the introduction that the Honorable Minister gave to the initiative that we are running, Samvad. संवाद एक राष्ट्रीय पहल और एकीकृत संसाधन है बाल संरक्षण मानसिक स्वास्थ्य और मनोसामाजिक देखभाल का. This is the Honorable Minister's gift to the children of India. It would interest you to know, friends, that once the MOU was signed between the Ministry and NIMHANS, where I represent, the Ministry actually got back to us to ask for specific inclusion of disability in the ambit of what we were expected to do. And we are operational now in 29 states. Now, here's the thing that एक बच्चा जो है चाहे वो दिव्यांग हो या न्यूरोटिपिकल हो, a neurotypical child is not equal to a student. And therefore a good student is a good child and a bad student is a bad child. A child is a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a grandson, a citizen, a music lover, a dancer, and a student. So how you define the identity of a child becomes very central to the development of well-being. अब इसको हम वास्तविक दृष्टिकोण से देखें तो कोई बच्चा जो है दिव्यांग है उसकी दिव्यांग स्थिति अगर तीव्र हो, we are talking about the severe and profound disability, they may not reach an Anganwadi. Right. But where we speak about people with mild disability, तो इनकी इच्छाएं होती हैं, इनके सपने होते हैं, they have aspirations, but they may not have the ability, compared to other neurotypical children. And often this aspect is ignored when we get education and disability focused, as we should be. This is not to take away from special ed and the very disability focused interventions that we do. But the well-being and mental health and identity of the child, there are one or two other issues that I want to draw to the attention of this audience, which is about protection risks, and that's what Samvad is doing. That how do you expect a child with disability to be able to articulate humiliation or articulate exclusion, and what is the language that a child has? And this came to light when Samvad was actually asked to assist in the Muzaffarpur Child Institution case, where 47 children were subjected to continuous abuse by people who ran the institution. 20 of these children had either hearing or speech disability or intellectual disability. Now, how do we gather evidence from this? This is what Samvad does. And this transdisciplinary approach, that it's not enough for a mental health professional to diagnose PTSD or the extent of disability. One has to look at other processes of inclusion.
Right.
Similarly, it's not enough for a judge to listen to testimony and adjudicate. Who's the child? Is the child 3 years old, 6 years old with intellectual disability, 9 years old with hearing and speech problem? तो इन तरह के बच्चों से जब तक कि हम mental health और developmental implications of evidence gathering when we look at child forensics as a matter of, so there's a whole world out there. And the last word that you spoke about, hidden disabilities, children with ADHD or children with autism spectrum disorders, and the extent to which a critical system like the Anganwadi system and 2.0 as well as Saksham Anganwadi, और ये बात सुबह से हम कई बार कह चुके हैं, this is the world's biggest welfare program, and this is the biggest opportunity that we really have to look at the emerging identities of the children that we so ably seek to assist. So this is the frame of reference that one needs to keep in mind to keep the centrality of the identity of the child in focus as we look at other assistance that we provide.
Dr. Chopra, what are the specific techniques that frontline workers need to be empowered with, for early detection, or for that matter, even handling children with disabilities?
So this was one of the major obstacles in incorporating early detection and inclusion for the Anganwadi worker, because it was always felt and reiterated even by many Anganwadi workers that how do we find out? Disability is not our topic. It is something which is the medical professional has to do. So with simplified tools, it is possible to detect disabilities, and especially when you link it with developmental norms and milestones about which the Anganwadi worker is absolutely aware, having day and night working with children and having access to the activities and behaviors that they show in their Anganwadi center. So an Anganwadi worker who knows the developmental milestones would be able to know that this child is not developing the way this child should. So as soon as you link up a typical development and see it as a deviance from typical development, it becomes easy to detect milestones. Having said that, this would be something which would be little informal.
Right.
It's also possible to have very simplified signs which we could communicate through checklists, through posters to the Anganwadi workers, in which we have things like, very simple things like, we expect that between 6 to 12 months, for example, an infant's babbling goes up. That's a milestone in language development. But a child who has got hearing impairment, and how do we learn language? We learn language by listening to language. It's like a computer. The linguistic input would make the child process the phonetics of that language, and from that language that assessment or the language input which has gone in, the child would be able to identify the phonemes or the sounds of that language and begin to make words at 1 year. And this the child practices between 6 to 12 months, for example, all the language sounds that he's hearing, which we call babbling. So a child who cannot hear has got no linguistic input. So it is a warning sign for us to see that, and hearing disability, as has been referred to so many times, is something which is an invisible disability.
Right.
So signs of this kind, for example, a child, when you're talking to an infant or feeding an infant, that infant makes eye contact with the mother.
Right.
This is something, a normal development. So when he's feeding also, he would leave the breast and look at the mother and coo and smile at her. A child who's got visual loss wouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
So these are very simple things which are easy to communicate. Coming to the second part, that what do the Anganwadi workers do with the child? So we already have the Anganwadi worker who's an ECCE worker.
Right.
She knows the normal things which she undertakes, the activities which she undertakes. So for a child with, for example, who has physical disability, the challenge would be, how do we get that child to the Anganwadi?
Right.
Do we have a barrier-free environment?
Right.
Does the child have a physical access to the Anganwadi? So then she has to liaison with the PWD or whatever the CDPO has to do that and make the Anganwadi accessible, for example.
So we'll ask that to Ramita जी, आप आंगनवाड़ी में काम करती हैं, तो जितने भी दिव्यांग बच्चे आते हैं, उनका अर्ली आइडेंटिफिकेशन हो, न्यूरोलॉजिकल चैलेंजेस जो हैं, उसको किस तरह से आप आइडेंटिफाई करती हैं, और क्या आपको किस तरह, और परिवार से क्या आपको सहायता मिलती है?
मेरा नाम रमिता है। यहाँ उपस्थित सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। मैं अट्टा गांव सेक्टर 27 नोएडा गौतम बुद्ध नगर में आंगनवाड़ी कार्य करती हूँ। मैं जिस समुदाय में काम करती हूँ, आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर का काम, उस समुदाय में, उस समाज में जो हम सर्वे करते हैं वो हम साल में 2 बार करते हैं, जिसमें हमें बहुत सारे बच्चे भी मिलते हैं, बहुत अच्छे लोग भी, बहुत ऐसे नहीं समझने वाले भी। कुछ लोग ऐसे होते हैं, जैसे हम बच्चे, हमारे यहाँ 40 बच्चे हैं जो हमारे 3 से 6 वर्ष के जो हमारे केंद्र पे आते हैं। उसमें उस सर्वे के दरमियान कुछ बच्चे हमें दिव्यांग भी मिले। अब उन परिवार वालों से मिलना, कुछ लोग तो ऐसे होते हैं जो बहुत अच्छे से अपने बच्चे को कहते हैं, हाँ मैडम, मुझे तो आज तक ऐसा मौका मिला नहीं है, आज आपने मेरे बच्चों के साथ ये सुविधा दे रहे हैं तो क्यों ना हम इसका लाभ लें। कुछ ऐसी माताएं मिली जिन्होंने अपने बच्चों को छुपाना चाहा, कहा नहीं मैडम, हम अपनी लड़की को ये दिव्यांग के नाम से नहीं बता सकती हूँ, क्योंकि आगे इनकी शादी में भी, पढ़ाई में भी, समाज में अभिशाप के रूप में लोग देखेंगे, हमें सही नज़र से नहीं देखेंगे, इसीलिए हम अपने बच्चे का नाम नहीं देंगे आपके यहाँ। फिर हम लगातार उन परिवार के साथ मिलते रहे कि किसी तरह इनके मन को हम जीते कि ये कल से हमारे यहाँ अपने बच्चे को भेजना शुरू कर दे। तो मेरे साथ हमारी सुपरवाइज़र भी मुझे काफ़ी सहयोग दिया कि हम भी चलेंगे आपके साथ। हमारी CDPO मैडम, जब उन तक ये सूचना मिली तो हमारी CDPO पूनम तिवारी जी हैं, वो भी हमें बहुत काफ़ी सहयोग दी कि हम उनके घर तक हम भी चलेंगे। शुरू में इतनी
बाकी जो बच्चे हैं क्लास में, वो इन दिव्यांग बच्चों को कैसे देखते हैं? क्या उनमें भी
और जो हमारे 36 बच्चे हैं वो इन बच्चों को अलग नज़र से देखते हैं कि मैडम इन बच्चों को अलग कर दो, हम अपने साथ नहीं बैठाएंगे, हमें भी ऐसा हो जाएगा, इसलिए इसको अलग कीजिए। 1 दिन, 2 दिन, 4 दिन इन्होंने देखा। हमने कहा ऐसा बच्चे नहीं होता है, हम सब बराबर हैं, जैसे आप हो ऐसे ये भी बच्चे हैं, हम इन बच्चों के आपके साथ ही खेलने के लिए देंगे। जो हमारे यहाँ TLM है, जैसे हमारे यहाँ SCL का कोहेसन फाउंडेशन ने एक रैंप बनवा दिया कि जो दिव्यांग बच्चे के आने में कोई दिक्कत ना हो कि आपके केंद्र तक कैसे आएंगे, उसके लिए उसके माध्यम से हमें TLM भी मिला, जो उसको देख के वो आकर्षित हो बच्चे। अब मैं सोची कि इन पेरेंट्स को कैसे यहाँ तक लाऊं, और पेरेंट्स को समझा के रोज़ उनके घर तक पहुँच गए, उनसे किए, बच्चों के साथ खेलते खेलते बच्चों में अब वो आ गया है कि जब मैं नहीं जाती हूँ तो उनके पेरेंट्स फ़ोन करके बुलाते हैं, मैडम आज आप नहीं आई हैं, तो ये बच्चे तो रोने लगते हैं कि आज हमारी मैडम नहीं आई है। फिर थोड़े दिन बाद धीरे धीरे जाने के बाद हमने ये सोचा और उनको भी ये सुझाव दिया, मैं अकेले यहाँ आती हूँ आपके घर, और हमारे केंद्र में बहुत सारे 40 बच्चे हैं, यदि आप अपने बच्चे को हमारे केंद्र पे भेजें तो बहुत बच्चों में सुधार होगी और कुछ सीखने को मिलेगा। ताकि इतने बच्चे को देखेंगे तो वो भी तो कुछ करने के लिए सोचेंगे कि हम भी एक चीज़ करें। वो अब रोज़ उनकी माताएं गोद में उठा के लाती हैं और 3 घंटा मेरे सेंटर पे बैठती हैं बच्चों के साथ। 2, 4, 10 दिन उन्होंने बैठा। अब वो निस्संदेह, उनको इतना यकीन हो गया कि कहीं हमसे बेहतर हमारी मैडम हमारे बच्चे को देखेंगी। अब वो छोड़ के जाती हैं। जो बच्चे घर में उठ के बैठते नहीं थे, बिस्तर पे टॉयलेट लैट्रिन वगैरह करते थे, वो बच्चे अब उठ करके उस रैंप के सहारे चलना चाहते हैं। उसके बाद हमारी मैडम ने हमें फिजियोथेरेपिस्ट से भी मिलवाया कि आपके यहाँ बच्चे को यदि फिजियोथेरेपी मिल जाए तो बच्चे का और सुधार हो जाएगा। तो हंस फाउंडेशन के तहत पूजा मैडम, ऐश्वर्या मैडम आकर के बच्चे को हर महीने 2 रोज़ आकर के थेरेपी देती हैं।
राइट। Pallavi ji, what she's saying actually, is a testament to the fact that Anganwadis are also changing, and our own vision towards disability is also probably like changing for the better. What is the future now? Because today Smriti Rani spoke about these Anganwadis developing into affordable daycare and low-income families, and their accessibility to good therapy is also something that has been a challenge. How do you see these Anganwadis developing now?
First of all, मैं ये कहूँगी रमिता जी इसका एक ज्वलंत एग्जाम्पल है हाउ वी वांट द आंगनवाड़ीज टू प्रोग्रेस. एक आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर इफ इज़ लाइक रमिता जी. So what we want, this is policy. This is a paper which we have put in on paper. This is a book. If it gets translated like Ramita ji and all Anganwadi workers and the community acceptance, the parents' acceptance, we are seeing the progress there. So in the similar fashion, I think so what the ministry and our minister and as officers we have envisaged is that practicality, so training of more and more Anganwadi workers and community acceptance and so that the children, each child is a special child.
Dr. Shishadri, one of the things that has often bothered me is the lack of disability in public spaces. You don't see many children with disabilities in parks playing with other children, and even with neurological disabilities, there's always this thing that एक बच्चा आया था, he was very peculiar. They don't understand what, he could be ADHD, he could be on the spectrum. How do we look at changes in the society with respect to this kind of mindset?
It's very interesting you should ask this question. Actually, Ranita जी के खुलेपन की प्रशंसा करनी होगी. ये नहीं कह रही थी कि आंगनवाड़ियों में सब भला चंगा है, कि इंक्लूजन बड़े आसानी से होता है, ये नहीं कह रही थी. And if you relate it to the point that Nipun made, which is the pernicious combination of stigma and lack of access that gives not only to low identification, but also the lack of opportunities for the kind of transformation that we are using. And on the one hand, the issue of the vulnerability of children with disability and the kind of risks that they have. An ADHD child has the risk of being beaten and punished much more than, let's say, a neurotypical child. And how does an Anganwadi teacher actually recognize red flags or lal jhande kya hain, खासकर की समस्या जो है, and especially if children with disability have challenging behaviors. Now, I want to draw the attention of the audience not only to the elegance of the protocol that has been developed, but also, agencies like NIPSID, which have been working on the field to actually execute some of the ministry's mandates, is other than what needs to be done in terms of inclusion, there has to be a simultaneous campaign really to visibilize disability. Now, many countries have, for example, in some countries, there's a whole organization of people with disability which look only as aesthetic spaces. So they perform and they sing and so on. The crux of the answer is basically this. चाहे वो आम पाठशालाओं में शिक्षा हो या आंगनवाड़ी हो या दिव्यांग बच्चों के साथ हम जो या तो स्पेशल स्कूल्स में करते हैं या आंगनवाड़ियों में करते हैं, सवाल ये है कि किसी भी तरह की शिक्षा का मूल आधार क्या है. What's the basic premise of education? And here is my submission to you, friends. The basic purpose of any education, divyang or otherwise, is the development of an egalitarian personhood. एक समानाधिकारी व्यक्तित्व का विकास.
Yes, okay.
The development of a socially responsive and responsible citizenry. नागरिकता की जो हम बात करते हैं और दिव्यांग बच्चों की नागरिकता का अधिकार जो है.
Right.
और तीसरी बात ये है the development of a personality that is imbued with aesthetic sensibility.
Okay.
कला, प्रकृति, संगीत, रंगमंच, or how much you open out these spaces. And that's why toys and music and AV aids and all of this become part of the...
Right.
So I think there have to be two tracks here. One track is the protocol that has been developed, but the second track has to be the visibilization through a campaign mode of disability. And this is my submission that perhaps we need to take this on campaign mode as a strategy to really address the question that you have raised.
Nipun, your thoughts on that? Visibilizing disability is something that I think is very important, but like Sir was saying that, this work needs to be done on multiple fronts. There's of course education, there's of course visibility. How do you look at not just stigma for that matter, but even normalizing? People have a certain idea and that needs to be challenged of able body being
Absolutely.
the best.
And I think the first step towards that comes from understanding what really is disability. I'll go back to my own childhood just for 30 seconds before coming back to this answer. And I think this is very relevant to Anganwadi workers who are going to be frontline workers diagnosing children with disabilities and referring them to medical experts. When I was born, my arms and legs were fractured, and when I was taken out of my mother's womb, and my mother showed me to various doctors, and instead of really diagnosing my disability, doctors started building a wide variety of negative prognosis about me, including one doctor who started saying, निपुण एक wooden doll जैसे ज़िंदगी जिएगा. Another who said, इसकी गर्दन सीधी है, इसको जिंदा तो रखना चाहिए, पर इससे कोई उम्मीद मत रखना, etc. And it took her a couple of years before my disability was finally diagnosed as a disability called arthrogryposis, which basically means that the muscles in my arms and legs had not fully developed. But intellectually I was fully fine, and that's when she decided that I should go to a normal school, and that's how my journey really started. I think there are millions of children in that sense who get stuck not getting properly diagnosed. And what results in that is that the child in a way gets punished by not getting the proper support infrastructure.
Thank you all the guests. We time to wrap up this conversation, but of course the biggest takeaway is that efforts need to be made to visibilize disability in the best possible ways. The protocol that you've brought out is of course a remarkable feat in normalizing conversations and also institutionalizing care for young children. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.